Hello, and welcome to the IPMA HR presentation of 7 ways to maximize employee potential through coaching and feedback. Thank you to our friends at NEOGOV for sponsoring today's webinar. Today we are joined by Kevin O'Connor, Account Executive at NEOGOV, and Thomas Frisch, Human Resources Manager at NEOGOV. Kevin and Thomas will discuss how performance management is a necessary tool for organizational success in the public sector. By arming managers with the tools they need to effectively coach their employees, government agencies and higher education institutions can accelerate development in their organization. Through the use of coaching and mentorship, managers can align employee goals with the organizational and strategic ones, position employees for growth within the greater organization, and plan for succession. A few housekeeping items for today's webinar. We will have all the participants on mute. Please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to submit questions throughout the presentation. We will address the questions at the end. Please use the Q&A box versus the chat box so that we can address all the questions as they come in. We will have polling questions throughout the presentation for you to participate in. This presentation will be recorded and available along with the slides on the IPMA HR website after today's presentation. The slides are also available as part of your registration package for today's session. This is a reminder for those of you that are IPMA CP, IPMA SCP certified. Today's webinar provides you with 1 point towards recertification. If you are not currently certified, you can visit IPMA HR's website and learn more information under Get Certified. We appreciate your feedback. An evaluation from the presentation is included in your registration package. Any questions that we cannot get to in today's hour of time, we will make sure to follow up with you. Thank you, Kevin and Thomas, for being with us today, and take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jacqueline. And thank you to everybody carving out some time for Thomas and I today. Obviously, NEOGOV's partnership with IPMA HR has been a long-standing one for us, and really excited to be able to bring some content your way today. Hopefully it helps in some of the performance management as well as training initiatives that you're maybe looking at from a day-to-day perspective. Just to start out here, today's goal, we're going to kind of continue to come back to this area, so I want to hit this home early. We're really going to be looking for a way, and you're probably looking for a way in your internal processes as well, to give employees the power to maximize their potential by providing managers with actionable ways to integrate coaching and feedback into your organization's culture, right? Sounds really great. Nice little blurb there. We're going to dive in today to kind of find the key 7 tips where hopefully we can end up as our kind of end result. A little bit about us. Promise I'll keep this one really short. My name's Kevin O'Connor. I'm an account, like Jacqueline said, I'm an account executive here with NEOGOV. Been with NEOGOV working with public sector agencies for about 4 years now. So I've had a unique opportunity to work with some agencies on the East Coast with some of their processes, as well as some agencies out here in California. And before that, I had a brief, albeit very, very brief stint in private sector HR right out of college. So have some experience in the HR field, not nearly as much as Thomas, which is why I'm excited that he's here with us today. But that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. My name is Thomas Frisch. I am the HR manager here at NEOGOV. I've been here not quite as long as Kevin. He's kind of a vet here, but I've been at NEOGOV for going on 2 years. I think actually my anniversary is next week. So I'm expecting a big celebration. Prior to that, I've been in private sector human resources for going on about a decade, specifically in the high growth technology market, where I typically have come in specializing in either recruitment or building out new processes. So really excited to be here today to talk about either training and the communication between managers and employees.
Awesome. Thanks, Thomas. And what's a webinar without starting out with a quick agenda? So some of the things that we're going to cover today, a little bit about NEOGOV for those of you that aren't familiar. Once again, I promise I'll keep that one pretty brief. We're going to go into some of the importance of feedback and coaching, right? Central to the idea of HR. So some of this will be review, but also the key is going to be the 7 tips of how we can take this home to our managers and employees and help them improve their processes as well. Now, a little bit about NEOGOV. Really, the end idea is we're an end-to-end HR software provider. We've been working with public sector agencies and higher education institutions for going on 20 years now. A lot of folks know us on the recruitment side of things with our job board, governmentjobs.com. A lot of you might be using our applicant tracking system. We also specialize in the areas of day-to-day management of HR with payroll, time and attendance, as well as kind of our central focus today, the topic of employee development is really going to be where this comes in. And so we're going to talk about some of the key areas where generally when agencies think about employee development, they think about performance evaluations and training. And so those kind of make up the foundation of that general topic. And so we're going to look beyond the software today into kind of the 7 ways, like I mentioned, that a lot of agencies factor these into their processes. So first, let's talk about why feedback and coaching are important, right? Undoubtedly, because a large portion of you on this call are working in HR in one form or another, I'm guessing you already know the importance of coaching and feedback. However, a couple stats that we've found and discovered in some of the research from our partners that we've worked with over the years really stood out to us and really kind of brought us to this topic of how do we really combat some of these employee engagement issues. The first one here shows a little over a quarter of employees strongly agree that feedback they get helps them do better work, right? Pretty straightforward, probably not all that surprising. But it's also a key stat in that a quarter of employees are strongly giving us a sense of what they specifically want from their manager when it comes to driving performance for them, right? So we'll come back to that here throughout the presentation, throughout the 7 tips. The second stat, unfortunately, kind of shows that while employees want more training, they simply aren't getting that same level of training today for one reason or another, right? There might be a lack of access. An employee taking this survey might say they want to give training, but then we all know that once they get that training in front of them, maybe they aren't taking advantage of it, right? Which is something we're going to also talk about combating here today. And most of the time, right, when I think about process management or I talk to agencies about process management, the easiest thing to do at the front end is to really understand what's maybe preventing us historically from getting to that ideal amount of, in this case, employee engagement, right? And the 3 top reasons that we've historically seen as we work with agencies is 1, the employee feels a little lost when trying to understand how their goals that they've worked out with their manager align with the goals of the agency overall, right? A lot of agencies I work with, they might have in their annual budget key performance indicators that they need to go back to city council, their executive board with. How does an employee align what they need to do from a day-to-day potential with what that overall looks like as an agency? And generally, if there is this lack of alignment, it kind of leads the employee to struggle to find the greater purpose in that day-to-day work that they're maybe going through. The second one is manager feedback can often be too past action criticism, right? Focused too much on the historical lack of performance in this case, instead of forward-looking optimism. And so helping an employee kind of understand what they need to do better instead of simply, I just need you to be better, is a key area where a manager can help kind of translate, hey, this is what you're historically doing and this is what we would like to see in the future. So making sure that they have some actionable takeaways as an employee once they receive that feedback. The third and final barrier that we often see is, kind of goes back to that 65% stat that we just saw, was the skill-based training opportunities just aren't abundant enough for the everyday employee, right? We're not seeing the amount of training opportunities or growth opportunities for that everyday employment to gain the skills that they maybe need, not only for the position that they're currently in, for maybe a position that they'd like to see in the future. And so as I alluded to, we're going to go into those 7 ways where you're really going to be able to flip the script when it comes to employee engagement and ensure that you get the right buy-in from both managers and employees. Okay. But before we do that, I'm going to throw it over to Thomas real quick.
Excellent. Thanks, Kevin. Poll question number 1. We want to hear from everyone. It gives us all a better understanding of what we're doing out there in the industry. So question number 1, how often do your employees set goals with their managers? Is it once per month? Is it every few months? Is it once per year? Or is it never? Hopefully we're not answering never, but that could be potential right now. So let's hear what everyone's got to say. When I talk to our managers, whether it's NEOGOV or it's past employers that I've worked for, about setting goals, it really makes you the difference between being just a manager and managing their day-to-day responsibilities and what I like to call an influencer. Actually influencing the career of your employees, whether it's you as an HR representative, or it's you teaching your managers how to truly be an influencer. Because setting goals is all about growth. This is how we know where to grow. It's how we could actually build a tangible vision of what needs to be accomplished in order to achieve these goals. So this is so important. If you're not doing it, or if your managers are not doing it, I really encourage you guys to move in that direction. It shows the most important thing is that we're investing in our employees' future. And we're going to talk a lot more about that later on. But it looks like we got our poll results, and it shows pretty consistent. We have 74% of the respondees saying that managers are having discussions with their employees once a year about their goals. Not terribly surprising. I would probably imagine it's in correlation with annual review time. Yeah, not terribly surprising that's where we are. So we have 74%, we have 18% talking with their employees every few months. Once a month, we have 3%, and we do have 5% at the never, so let's work on that 5%, and we're going to get that number up. So employees are 3.6 times more likely to be engaged with their managers that are actually involving them in goal setting. And I kind of view goal setting in 2 ways. But overall, as a total, collaboration when it comes to goal setting is a way to support your employees. Again, we're talking about going from being a manager to being an influencer and actually influencing the career and the expectations that your employees have, the experience that they have. I talked about goal setting really comes in 2 waves. So one is including your employees in the goal setting for maybe team goals, or how it's looping into organizational goals. And I love having managers who do that with their employees, because it helps the employee feel like they're actually part of the solution, and not that they are just getting these marching orders of, this is what you need to do. I'm your manager, I'm telling you what to do. It's, let's work together. Let's figure out what that solution is. If they're actually part of the solution, they're going to feel more ownership about it, and they're going to be more engaged. So that's definitely one big thing that is an accomplishment. But then the other part is, working with employees to work on their own personal goals. Their level of engagement is going to be there if it shows that their manager is investing that kind of time with the employee to kind of help them grow and help them get better in their own job. So it really works in both ways. And I think that, when I view goals, I say it kind of comes in tiers. We have the employee goals that should tie into your team goals, that should tie into your department goals, that ultimately should tie in some way into your organizational goals. And nothing should be independent. So, Kevin?
Absolutely. And that actually kind of leads me directly into tip number 1. So we finally have gotten to the tips that I promised we would get to here. And we're really going to start with the beginning of the goal setting process, right? And one of the things that, especially from that feedback of the 74% that mentioned that they're doing it once a year, like Thomas said, most likely aligning with the actual evaluation process, is we want to make sure that we're involving the employee in the goal setting process, right? Employees automatically feel that increase in ownership over a goal if they feel like they were part of the conversation to come up with it, right? Also, this helps to ensure that the employee has the time and ability to ask his or her manager how their goals, like Thomas mentioned, cascade into the overall picture, right? Making sure that they are bought in, they have a little bit of ownership over what some of those higher end goals are for the agency and how that ties in directly to what their role looks like from a day-to-day employee's perspective, right? Similarly, it's an opportunity and a start for the manager to have more of that coaching or influencing conversation with the employee, right? Rather than I just go into my one-on-one with my boss, I'm having a conversation with my coach to really help me get to that next level. And we'll dive into that a little bit deeper here, deeper in the tips. The last point here, we're all familiar with SMART goals. If you're not, I highly recommend it. It's something that internally we use in our goal setting to make sure that the goals that we're using are both tangible and measurable, right? The hardest thing for a manager and an employee is to have a goal that they can't actually get a grip of what success looks like, as well as hopefully some measurable outcomes throughout the way, right? So I can kind of track, am I on pace to meet this goal, or is it kind of something that's maybe, you know, a little bit too tricky to understand where I'm at in the process? Okay. Another quick survey that we got here from Gallup. This is going to tie in a little bit with that 26% number. It's not where we got the 26% number, but it's very similar. And this is just simply how often are you receiving feedback from your manager? Now, what you'll notice is there's about 26% that are getting it at least a few times a week, a total of 50% that are getting it at least on a monthly basis, right? That's pretty positive, but unfortunately that leaves us with another 50% that are only receiving feedback maybe a few chances a year, right? And as we saw earlier with some of those numbers, we can only imagine what that bottom half is seeing from an engagement perspective, right? Are they really engaged in that goal setting process if they're not even getting any sort of feedback from a manager? Okay, and I've said this word frequency a couple times already. So why does frequency matter so much? One, it helps the manager create a more constant and open line of communication with the employee when it comes to his or her performance, which is going to be key, of course, right? That ability to have that dialogue early and often instead of just saving it for the annual review, where and I talk about this a number of times with my customers, but how many times have you talked to a manager at the end of the year, they say, you know, so-and-so got a 1 out of 4 on a communication skill, and you ask them, well, how long have you known about this? And they say 9 months, right? Instead of having that dialogue much earlier and trying to bring about change, they're simply holding it to the annual evaluation and hoping that it change, right? Now, selfishly, with performance management tools like NEOGOV and several others that are out there, there are often ways for managers to be able to easily and quickly document performance notes to help in some of these monthly or quarterly sessions where they're sitting down with the employee and checking in on progress, right? It also helps to remove some of the recency bias that you often maybe see in an annual review, where I'm simply a manager kind of trying to remember what happened in the last quarter instead of a holistic sense of how the year went, right? And then finally, frequency around feedback helps point the manager in the direction of giving more positive feedback, right? It's harder for them to say my employees can do no good if they're having to constantly give that feedback. They're going to start to pull back and see that a lot of it might be a little bit more on the positive side, which is going to help continue to kind of drive the employee's performance in a positive direction. Thomas?
Yeah. So did you know? I feel like it feels weird saying that every time. But so employees who receive daily feedback from their managers are 3 times more likely to be engaged than those who receive feedback once a year or less. This should be pretty obvious. Daily feedback, realistically, is a little challenging. You know, unless you happen to have one or two direct reports that happen to sit right across from you, I realize that the logistics on this might be a little challenging, but I think it's the spirit of moving towards that more consistent feedback, which is where we're trying to go with this. And it really comes down to that manager-employee relationship that you're able to build. It plays a factor in the goal setting, but it also plays a factor in just that buildup of trust and loyalty between the employer and manager, which I plan to talk about a little later on. Employees recognize the efforts that managers are putting in when they go above and beyond and do this. And I say above and beyond pretty loosely because as a human resource professional, like all of you on this call, or at least most of you on this call, this is an expectation of managers. You're supposed to be doing this. And managers need to, and we as human resource professionals need to keep on top of our managers to prioritize this time. Now, we could all say, oh, I have too many things on my plate. I'm working too hard. I'm working, you know, I always joke, I'm working 2 jobs. And I think in, you know, human resources, everyone's working probably 3 or 4 jobs. But managers need to prioritize this time. This is so important. This is part of the experience. When I talk to employees, as I'm sure many of you on this call do, we do exit interviews, and a lot of employees, the reason they leave is because of their managers and because of the fact that they don't see an opportunity for growth. Now, both of those are very correlating factors, and it gives the manager a lot of responsibility and a lot of power to really control the experience that an employee is having. So again, employees are going to recognize those efforts that the managers are making in building that, you know, building my career, building the growth that I want to see, supporting the growth that I want to see. And ultimately, that's going to build a level of accountability because we're having consistent conversations. You know, Kevin mentioned on the prior slide, having conversations once a year is a little tough on building that level of accountability. If I know that my manager is going to talk to me frequently about what it is that I'm doing and providing feedback, it's going to kind of self-motivate me a little bit more to make sure I get my stuff done, as well as that loyalty that I had brought up a few minutes ago. If I know that my manager truly cares about me and wants to see me grow, even if that means that I'm growing outside of my department, I'm going to be more loyal to the manager. I'm going to be more loyal to the organization. I'm going to be more loyal to the goals of the organization. And ultimately, I'm going to become a better employee. So when we talk about providing feedback, maybe it's not daily. Maybe it can be. But having it more consistently and building that environment of, I'm providing you feedback because I truly care. Kevin mentioned, you know, the more you're providing feedback, the more there's going to be positive feedback. In just having that consistent feedback and showing, I'm building an environment of, I care because I want you to grow, and I want you to grow because I care is extremely important as a manager, and becoming that true influencer of your employees' experience at whatever organization you are, whether it's private or public.
Definitely. Tip number 3, for those of you keeping score at home. So we've talked a little bit about providing continuous feedback, why that's important. But the next kind of piece to this puzzle is we've got to make sure that that feedback is effective, right? If it's not effective, then we might just be wasting our time, right? If the employee's not going to get what they need out of it, or the manager's not going to put the time and effort into making it efficient, then we're just wasting our time. So in order to keep employees engaged and help them reach that full potential, managers really want to hit home that idea of efficiency, right, and effectiveness. When we provide effective feedback, it leaves our employees generally feeling more motivated and inspired to do their best work, right? Going back to that 26% stat. It shows them that the manager is actually supporting them and wanting them to improve. Thomas has talked about that idea of being an influencer. This is a key element of that, right? The one-on-one is the normal way that a lot of folks do this, right? Unless you're overseeing 30 people where maybe you've got another layer there where you've got a supervisor that's filling in. These one-on-ones are really your opportunity to come in and make sure that these are done in an effective manner, right? And the biggest way down there at the bottom is taking notes, right? Making sure that you're documenting these conversations. It's obviously going to hit home for those of you that are HR professionals, right? You'd love to see an audit trail of everything so that if there are any instances of personnel decisions, pay increases, promotions, all that kind of stuff, you've got a paper trail of it, or at least an audit trail. But this just helps to make sure that these one-on-ones are effective as possible. And the easiest way to do that is generally to come prepared, right? Hardest thing I know when I was doing one-on-ones in a previous position, the easiest thing for me was to just kind of roll into the one-on-one and hope I was going to wing it, right? Now I notice my manager in my position always comes with a clear-cut agenda of what we're going to be covering, and I see more value of it, especially as an employee. And so what we did was here, we actually did a quick survey of about 100 HR pros like you, just to find out what some of the more effective questions that they were asking in their one-on-ones, right? You're going to get the slide deck after this, and so you'll be able to take and I would recommend screenshotting this and sending this to your managers. Find out if they're asking some of these questions already, right? Some of them probably are, but some of them are probably really begging for some key questions to hopefully coax more information out of the employee in terms of what they would like to see so that we can help drive that engagement, right? And all of that is going to loop back to this idea of the more common feedback becomes more positive, right? Because of that frequency and effectiveness comes the engagement piece, right? So you see here, as that feedback gets more frequent and more positive, we start to see a higher level of engagement, right? Which is really going to be that key component of how do we get better performance, more buy-in from the employee to make sure that they've got, like I said, that buy-in into our performance management process. And hopefully we could start to see them really grow in the position that they're in, or certainly start to find positions that they're interested in, right? So we've made it through 3 tips, and this is kind of what I would call the foundation of really a true performance management process, right? We're making sure that expectations are clear, coaching is regularly available from the manager, and accountability is understood, right? We're setting that foundation, that framework for what ultimately is going to drive the future, right? Next, we're going to cover how we move performance management into performance development and how that requires the manager to be a little bit more of a coach and a little less of a boss in this case. So without further ado, tip number 4, once again, for those of you keeping score at home. What is one of the most important agency results of an annual performance evaluation, right? We do our performance evaluations, we get them in, merit increases maybe go out. Some of you may be doing COLA increases, labor negotiations decide how much that they get merit-wise, whatever it might be. What you're left with generally is a stack of performance evaluations, a bunch of results, and there's a bunch of data behind the scenes to really understand where some of our skill gaps are, right? So I can get a sense of essentially an old school strengths and weaknesses analysis of the agency, right? Areas we're strong in, areas we need additional help in, right? With these results, we can kind of start to formulate where those are, where some of those weaknesses maybe can be, but we can't stop there, right? Understanding where we're falling short is useless unless we begin to develop an action plan for actually addressing those areas, right? It's one thing to say, well, we're not doing so hot at communication, oh well. It's another thing to say one of our big goals for next year is going to be communication training specific to departments or positions or employees even, to then see if we can move the needle there, right? Over there on the right, we've been doing a lot of research actually over the last 2 years. We've got some unique partnerships with the State Chief Administrators Association, and we did a quick poll, and they said about 64% of them said that this growing skill gap is really the greatest workforce challenge that they face today, right? And that's being seen all the way, in that case, up at the state level, down to some of the smallest organizations that I'm working with are facing some of the same facts, right? Especially now, you know, certainly don't want to make this talk too much about COVID-19, but it's come up even more for agencies where they're being asked to do more with less. And so this is another area where you might be looking to employees to do things beyond their general job description. And so they're going to need those additional skills to make sure that they're successful. And that leads me to poll question number 2.
Excellent. Poll question number 2. Are you identifying employee skills gaps and tracking progress? Simple yes or no. Are we identifying employee skills gaps and tracking progress? This is really, when I think of this side, this is career pathing. And it's actually one of my great passions is career pathing. Kevin could probably allude to that. I talk about it too often, and I think my managers are losing their mind because all I ever talk about is this specific part. I call it a skills gap analysis, which if anyone on this call has ever had a finance background or went to school and took finance classes, they probably heard of a gap analysis. This is the same thing. And it's really, this is all about the career pathing and creating that clear vision for the employee on what's needed to progress within the organization. It's, you know, one thing that I always talk about during our performance review process is I want our employees to walk away knowing I need to do this and I need to accomplish this exact thing to be meeting expectations, to be exceeding expectations. It goes the same way with I need to know exactly what I need to do or experiences I need to have or skills that I need to have to get to my next position that I want to do. And that's a communication with the manager and the employee. It looks like we're getting the results in right now. So are you identifying employee skills gaps and tracking progress? We're getting a little closer. We have 70% at no and 30% at yes. This is not easy. I will tell you as a HR professional, this takes a lot of work on the back end because we have to actually put together for every single position what that actually looks like so that when the manager goes in and meets with the employee, they can determine, okay, this is where you're at, this is what you need to do, or this is where you need to be, and this is what you need to do in order to get there. Without that though, we don't have true career pathing. So, you know, this is something that is a very, very large HR project that is really HR, but also a strong cross collaboration with all the managers of the different departments. You know, I had to kind of had to drag the managers through it a little bit, but I needed their skill and their knowledge because they've worked those positions, not me. So, you know, for those of you that are doing it, that's phenomenal. I love it. And, you know, hats off. For those of you that are not, obviously you're not alone. We have 70% of the crowd that is not doing it. We're moving towards a world of we need more career pathing. There's more than just the dollars of how much we're getting paid. So this is a crucial part of that objective of getting to a point where employees see their experience at your organization as a true career, not just a job.
Definitely. And certainly with those results, it's not surprising, but for those 70% of you, hopefully from this, there will be some smaller ways where, like Thomas said, it seems like such a daunting project, but there are also smaller ways, smaller things that you can do to start chipping away at that. So then maybe next time we do a webinar like this, we could put a little bit of a maybe, like a little halfway in there so you're kind of making some progress. So one of the things that we talked about at the very top of the call, we're getting to that second stat really, is the 65% of employees that wanted more training but simply aren't getting enough, right? So here's where we're going to start to address that. However, and Thomas can probably back me up on this, and once again, small amount of HR knowledge on my end, at least from the experience standpoint, but certainly talking to folks, one of their greatest concerns when it comes to training is almost a catalog dump, right? Where I just simply give out thousands of courses to every employee and say, go take whatever training you want, right? It doesn't really facilitate what the employee is looking for. It's, I want to have that conversation with my manager to say, out of these thousands of courses, which really address the needs that I have. So once we kind of identify what those employee needs are, the manager, HR, and the employee can sit down together and come up with really a more customized training program to say, this is where you are today, and this is where you would like to be. This series of trainings is going to get you there, or it's going to be the closest thing we can do to get you there, right? And it's not all online training, right? One of the things that we've certainly learned with working with public sector agencies is there's so much institutional knowledge that you have from current employees, right? You've got folks that have been there for 15, 20, 30 years even. And so this idea of blended learning has become very, very key as I talk to more and more agencies out there in the market. The big thing is they want to pair that online course with the classroom course. Maybe you have a city manager or county manager or an executive director that's got really, really high understanding of leadership and they want to run a leadership workshop, right? Conferences are important. Getting out there and meeting your peers, understanding what they're seeing, right? I'm certainly preaching to the choir for those of you obviously on the call from IPMA HR. You know how much value you've been able to get from specific trainings like this, hopefully. And then shadowing programs as well, right? One of the big things of career pathing is certainly understanding what other folks in the organization are doing, get a sense of what their day-to-day is and see if that matches with some of the skills that you maybe have, right? Beyond that, there's certainly the day-to-day that we see in HR, making sure we're compliant, making sure we're tracking completions, understanding where employees are, so that not only do they have the transparency of what needs to happen, but as the manager and HR, we can create accountability to make sure that the employee is actually taking the steps that they need to, right? We're going to give them the tools to do it, but we want to make sure that they're actually taking advantage of it, right? And then just that little stat over there is really the number one thing that that the millennial age group is identifying is as they're coming out of school and entering into the work world, they're understanding that they don't have every skill that they're going to need, right? They're not going to have every skill to become that next department manager. Maybe they want to be a department head, whatever it might be. They don't have the skills, so they need to get that from their employer. And that's really where we want to make sure that we're driving that. And it's not just a millennial thing. As you can see, 69% of non-millennials are also mentioning the same thing, right? So it's a key topic that a lot of people are talking about. Now, some of the quick bullet point benefits of a customized learning plan, right? Help the employee to understand how to grow in their current role, right? Which is going to be important. Learn additional skills to be able to do more with less, right? As that all important point of a job description, once again, preaching to the choir in HR is job duties as needed, right? So beyond the scope of their current role, what are some other areas in cross-department work that they're doing and what skills are needed for that, right? We also want to continue to really force the issue of bringing outside talents that they maybe have that they don't think is an important part of their role and really understand how that maybe aligns with some of the needs of the organization, right? Get creative, understand that, you know, somebody that has a background in improv is going to have really good, you know, maybe communication skills, and how does that affect their work that they're doing, right? We can kind of get creative and see what's out there. And then the final one is we just simply want to increase their efficiency as a team member, right? No one's going to complain about that, not their manager, not their team members, certainly not us in HR as we kind of grow that efficiency. On top of that, we're also getting them more engaged. So it's really kind of a win-win situation.
43% of employees do not believe their expectations of individual development and career development are being met, which is key to attracting and retaining a qualified workforce. That was pretty wordy. This is something that we all need to do better at. Even if your organization is doing well, this is something that's going to be striving for continuous improvement, because this is the new wave of building out careers, is showing people and supporting the employees on how they could get to where they want to go. We're not always going to be able to pay the most, you know, or we're not always going to be able to have the best benefits. But that's not the only thing that employees look for anymore, or candidates are looking for, or applicants are looking for. They want to know, what are some of those other experiences that I'm going to be able to have? And a lot of that's around growth. Something that I tell all of my managers is, we all got to the place that we're at today because someone gave us a chance. Someone gave us a responsibility one day that they probably could have done in an hour, and it took us a week. But it started growing those experiences and those skills that we needed to get to where we are today. And with leadership comes great responsibility. And it's time to kind of pay it forward and go to the new employees that are coming in, or existing employees that are maybe in a rut or just want to grow, and give them those responsibilities and give those experiences, so that it shows, hey, maybe I can't pay you the most, or maybe I can't give you a promotion right today because logistic wise, we just don't have the position open. But let me give you some experiences that are going to help you get there. And, employees are going to appreciate that. And, as a manager, one of the ways I tell this to the managers is, be selfish. If you get an employee to do it, yeah, it might be a little bit burdensome the first time because they're learning and you kind of have to help them. You might have to hold their hand a little bit, but afterwards they're going to get it. And that's one less thing on your plate now that you can now focus on other things that you need to do. So this is, again, it was a little wordy, but this is crucial as we move into the new world of HR and just overall management of employees.
Very good points. All right, we're almost there. Tip number 6. So micro-learning, right? You've probably been on webinars, understood it, seen different marketing material. It's certainly a hot topic across HR right now. Taking the old way of the 2-hour training video and boiling that down into really what ends up being more digestible snippets seems to be kind of what's most fitting for employees and what they'd like to see. I know personally, I'd rather take 5 10-minute training videos over the course of a week, something that we've certainly started to implement here, instead of one 50-minute training, right? I'd venture a guess that a lot of your employees are probably like me in this one small case. And this not only helps with the time management aspect, as we see down there at the bottom, one of the biggest barriers that we talk about outside of the 3 that we talked about before is training takes time, right? And oftentimes, once again, we're asking employees to do more with less, and on average, they're maybe getting 5 minutes a day to train. So how do we meet them in the middle and address some of the training needs that they maybe have with a training that's more digestible? The other aspect of this is that's really interesting is when you talk about some of these smaller trainings that are taken piece by piece, it helps with some of the behavioral change that's maybe being asked for, right? So as that employee is continuing going through that training, 10-minute reminders every day really help them to kind of change some of their behavior and bring in and start to implement that in a way that's hopefully a little bit more meaningful. Number 3.
All right, poll question number 3, and I believe this is the last of the poll questions. What types of training does your organization provide? Is it online training, classroom, shadowing, conferences and events, other? Curious what the other is. So Kevin kind of spoke to this a little bit already, but employees all learn differently. We all learn differently. Some people can sit through a very long training. Other people need to actually be tangible and have experiences. Like, so one thing that I've experienced, more recently is I am soon to be a new parent, and my wife bought me all these books on basically how to keep a baby alive, and that just doesn't work for me. So I've been watching YouTube videos, and I need more tangible, like, give me a diaper, maybe give me a baby doll to practice, whatever it might be. But, reading a 400-page book, my level of actually retaining the knowledge is really not going to be there. Providing the training is probably the easiest and best way that we could support employees. Easiest because it's a lot of upfront, but best because we're showing employees, this is kind of our actions speak louder than words. We're showing employees, we're here to support you. We're giving you these resources to support you. It looks like the results came in, it's pretty even between, we have 39% of organizations are using online training, 25% classroom training, 1% on shadowing programs, 18% on on-site learning and conferences and events, and 17% other. Email me afterwards if you did other, because I'd love to know what the others are, because I'm always trying to, okay. I'm always trying to learn myself.
I checked the chat. It looks like a lot of folks, good feedback on poll creation here. The one option that's missing is all the above, which I think goes back to some of the things that we talked about too, is just making sure that as much of your training program can be blended. Let's try and incorporate that as much as possible. So it doesn't surprise me that it's kind of spread out across the board, but I'm sure a lot of you would prefer maybe a little bit more of a multi-selection question than just one option, because hopefully we're seeing more of that.
Yeah, and speaking on the blended, there was a very low response rate for the shadowing, and I would encourage all of you to look into building shadowing programs within your organization. I kind of did it here at NEOGOV as a supplemental training for employees outside of the online trainings and all of that. But this is talking about giving them those experiences, and our employees have loved it. We've had employees that have come into our headquarters for a week to train in positions, and maybe that's not reasonable in your organizations, but employees are really, really buying into that opportunity to shadow a role. It's almost kind of like test driving before you buy. It's worked out really well. So if you're not doing it, I'd encourage you to even look into it as potentially a supplemental, or actually put it in as a full rotation in the training process for you.
Definitely. And then one final, did you know?
Did you know? Kind of already talked about this a little bit, but learning in bite-sized pieces makes the transfer of learning from the classroom to the desk 17% more efficient. This is pretty obvious that the smaller tidbits that you're learning at a time, you're going to retain more, you're going to be able to use it. I like to learn a little bit, take it back, try it out, come back, learn a little bit more, take it back. Also, if you do too much all at once, it could be a little intimidating for the employees. So as you're building out these training processes or programs in your organization, you want to build it all out at once so you can see what it's going to look like end to end. But as you're actually presenting it out to the employees, I'd highly encourage you to break it down into smaller segments.
Very good point. Last element of tip number 6 here, just same thing with the idea of micro learning. Just a couple different options here. We've talked a lot about the blended option. Some people don't like the idea of video learning. There's other areas out there. The two that I've actually found the most effective for folks that I've talked to is one, questions, just something as simple as adding a quiz or giving some sort of feedback and asking for feedback from the employee, whether that's a quiz or a survey. It just allows them to have a little bit more buy-in. Once again, the ticker's moving a little bit more instead of just clicking a video and just kind of mindlessly watching it. The second option is short articles and blogs. So this goes back a little bit earlier. We talked a little bit, I talked about with going to conferences and events, seeing your peers, right? This is an element of, if you have training from, let's say, a public works employee has an interesting article that they've seen about some of the areas that are most specific to their work, or you've got a customer service supervisor that develops a blog about different tips of the trade, and you share that with some of your frontline employees that are dealing with citizens day in, day out. There's a lot of value that comes from training coming directly from one of your peers, right? Oftentimes it seems daunting to come up with your own training, but just even kind of saying, hey, what's helped you in your day-to-day, and do you think it would help others, can really spur some of this micro learning and really help out some of the other folks that are in those departments or positions. Okay, last tip, number 7. So now that we've met with our employees on a regular basis, we've set goals with them, we've established a customized learning plan for them to reach those goals. Hopefully it's tailored to the organization's goals. We now need to put their new skills to work, right? So we've just developed a bunch of skills. Selfishly, as an agency, we'd like to see some benefit from that, right? As well as the employee. So once we kind of bring all of these things together, we of course want to track all the progress and incorporate this into those check-ins, but we really want to allow the manager to take a step back as a coach. Think of this almost like a game, right? We've gone to practice, we've gained the skills, the coach has trained the player. This is now the opportunity for the player or the employee to really shine. Let's see how they're doing. We've got continuing feedback going in there to make sure that they're getting things done, but this is really an opportunity for us to see those skills in action, and then also hopefully see some of the growth that we're looking for as well. Finally, in recap, interestingly enough, all 7 can be wrapped into 3, which is kind of interesting, but 7 sounded better than 3, I guess. So the first one really is the idea of bringing employees into the goal creating process early, often, and making sure that by providing that continuous and effective feedback, employees feel a little bit more engaged and bought in, right from the start is the big thing there. The second is, how do we use our performance management process to identify skill gaps, right? And then begin to leverage training against that to address skill gaps, right? Making sure that it's customized to the employee so that they're not just going into some generic training that they're not bought into, right? If it's a little bit more specific to them, we've taken the time to customize it to them and their needs, we're gonna see a lot more out of it as well, both as a manager and as an employee. And the third one is, with these managers kind of taking more of the coaching role, we want to really make sure that we're fostering that culture of new skills and new eyes on areas of improvement. That's another thing that I think Thomas touched on, is maybe we have existing issues that we've seen in the organization. And now, as we bring on new employees with new skills, they're going to have a fresh set of eyes on things that have been troubling in the past, and we can start to see improvements in areas maybe we didn't even think of, right? As we continue to see more diversity, not only of skills, of backgrounds, of areas of expertise, we start to see additional areas where we can continue to see growth. And that's really what's going to drive some of the organizational success that we all want to see, right? Not only at the individual employee level, which obviously we've talked about today, but that we'll start to see that cascade into the entire organization as well, to make sure that we're seeing that improvement. Okay. With that, hopefully it wasn't too lengthy, but if you have any questions, please ask. Most likely Thomas is going to be much better, but if you have any questions about something that we're seeing, with customers that are using NEOGOV, or anything in general, any questions that you have, I think you can put them in the Q&A pane, and just kind of see if there's anything there.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you guys for your presentation today. A lot of good, valuable information. I'd like to open it up for questions at this point. Our first question is, NEOGOV does not allow you to have managers and employees collaborate on goals and perform during evaluations. Are you going to change that?
Yeah, so there's a very good question. There's a roundabout way, I would say, to do it right now. It's not ideal. We've done an extensive amount of user testing and user kind of surveying from our Perform customers, and it's been one of the biggest things. What I'm starting to see more and more people do is, at the very beginning of the evaluation process, on the back, and call into customer support, and we can certainly help you with this, but part of the before ratings can be a kind of sit down of hey, what are a pick list of goals that we maybe see across the organization, and what makes the most sense for you as an employee. And in our case, we actually use it. We are one of the rare companies, we drink our own Kool-Aid. And it was an opportunity for me to sit down with my manager and say, in our case, what were some department goals that we could choose from? And then I picked 3 that were more specific to my role. So hopefully you guys can do something similar, but there's still areas for growth for us in that kind of arena as well. Good question.
Alrighty. Great. So this is a comment. Please let the instructors know that video learning is great. It makes a big difference, especially when you can see the instructor and not just listening to a conference call. What thing creates what one thing creates most employee engagement in your experience?
That's that is a very good question. I would say the thing that, in my experience, creates the most employee engagement is them feeling involved. I mentioned it a little earlier about the marching orders. If you're just a manager and you're managing their day-to-day and you're telling them what they have to do next, that's not really collaborating and letting them feel involved. One of the things that I feel we do actually relatively well here at NEOGOV is getting employee buy-in for what our ultimate goals are. And I think that's a real shine on leadership, and all of you on this call are leaders. And I encourage you to be very transparent with your employees on this is what's going on in the organization. Now let's work together to kind of come up with a solution. And if you're including them in stuff like that, and then also working with them on their own personal growth and their objectives in their own careers, then you're going to get loyalty and you're going to get engagement. And loyalty and engagement are the 2 things that we need to be successful. You could teach skills, but you can't teach loyalty and you can't teach engagement. So, but we can do those things on the side to really bring that into play.
Great. Any recommendations on where to obtain a copy of a skill gap analysis?
So I would be open if someone wanted to reach out to me directly. I'm open to kind of showing them what I've done personally within NEOGOV. Really all it is look at what a gap analysis is you're at one point and you're trying to get to another point, what needs to be there. The number one thing you need to do is clearly define every single position. Whether it's the technical skills that are needed to be in that position, the non-technical skills that are needed to be in that position, the experiences someone needs to have in order to get to that position. Once we've clearly defined those, just like a goal where we want to clearly define that, then we can determine, okay, Thomas, we need this. You don't have that yet. So now let's work together to get you those experiences and get you those skills so that you can get to that level. One thing that I forgot to mention earlier that I think is really important is this is our way of controlling the narrative on career pathing and an employee's experience within the organization. If we're very transparent about this is what you need to do in order to get here, we're controlling the narrative. And if we don't, unfortunately, employees control the narrative and they build their own truths on what's going on. And I would imagine many of you in HR would agree that sometimes the employees' truths are not always the truth, and oftentimes they could be skewed towards the negative, as you probably see in many a Glassdoor reviews. So that would be my suggestion. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of work to build out these gap analysis, but it starts with that collaboration with the managers of all the different departments because they know the positions best. So start with clearly defining the positions and then work backwards to the employee.
Okay. I have several questions here. Let's see if we can probably address about 2 more, and then we can follow up with the rest of them. Do you plan to enhance the development plan in NEOGOV? Currently, one development plan is available. One size does not fit all.
Yeah, certainly something that we've started to look at. A lot of our customers have gone more towards goal management, which is a little bit more forward-looking than development plans. but it's certainly an area that our product team has kind of, once again, from some of the user testing that we're doing and user feedback, it's another area where we feel like we still need to take the product to get to its full maturity level.
What are your recommendations on working with unions, specifically with division of labor law rules, when trying to implement programs such as shadowing job share with management duties?
It certainly gets a little trickier. It would be, once again, and job shadowing, as we kind of talked about, it's an entire idea of blended learning, right? It's more of, once, like the last question, one size doesn't fit all. There's going to be some elements where job shadowing doesn't make sense. And then you go more towards, how do we come up with different seminars, video learning, classroom trainings, where maybe a group of unionized employees can't partake in a particular duty that has management, but they can listen to that manager give a 1-hour talk or webinar about what they see on a day-to-day basis. So it's just about kind of finagling your way around some of the intricacies that come up on the union side of things, whereas Thomas probably is a little bit lucky where we don't fall into some of that with some of the private sector that we obviously deal with. But that would be one of the things that I would say would maybe be the most common that I hear from some of our customers, is just kind of, hey, I've got to deal with what I've got to deal with. How do I make the most of what I have?
All right, well, we have come to the close of the hour, and I want to make sure that do you, Kevin or Thomas, have any closing remarks at this point?
Just thanks again for.
Just want to thank you all for your time.
Yeah, thanks again for joining, and certainly if you've got any additional questions, obviously Thomas and I are available. You can go through our website, neogov.com. There's a way to get in contact with anybody. So if you've got questions about anything that we're seeing, or you want to see what this looks like for your agency individually, right? Might not be NEOGOV, but you're just curious to learn a little bit more. We're an open book over here, so reach out, and we're happy to help.
Great. Well, on behalf of IPMA HR, thank you, Kevin and Thomas, for sponsoring today's presentation, and to the attendees for participating at this time. So thank you for your participation. As a reminder, the slides from today's presentation will be available on the IPMA HR website. And IPMA HR is here to continue to support our members as the coronavirus situation evolves. IPMA HR is committed to being an ongoing source of information, resources, and networking for the public sector HR community. If you like what you heard today, please visit our website and join IPMA HR. Thank you for your participation, and this brings the presentation to a close. Stay safe and well, everyone.